A hardened Marine stood frozen in front of his wife's grave, not because of grief, but because of the little girl crying beside it. When he finally asked her why she was there, her answer shattered him. What happened next changed both of their lives forever. This is a story about loss, love, and the unexpected ways healing finds us. Before we dive into this emotional journey, make sure to subscribe, hit the like button, and turn on notifications. Stories like this remind us of the power of human connection. Don't miss out on more inspiring content. The unexpected visitor. The cemetery was quiet, the kind of quiet that pressed against Daniel Carter's ears like a weight. Fall had painted the trees in shades of amber and gold, and the crisp air carried the scent of damp earth and fallen leaves. He walked with slow, measured steps, his combat boots sinking slightly into the soft ground. It had been 3 years since the accident. 3 years since he had last heard his wife's laugh, felt her hand in his. And yet, every month, without fail, he came here. Claire's grave stood beneath an old oak tree, its branches stretching wide like sheltering arms. Daniel liked to think she would have appreciated that. The way the sunlight filtered through the leaves, dappling the stone in shifting patterns of light. He knelt, brushing a few stray leaves from the smooth granite. "Hey, Claire," he murmured, his voice rough. He never knew what to say. Some days, he told her about work, about the guys at the base who still asked after her. Other days, he just sat in silence, letting the ache in his chest speak for him. Today was one of those silent days. And then he heard it, a soft, hiccuping sob. Daniel's head snapped up. At first, he thought he'd imagined it, his grief playing tricks on him. But then it came again unmistakable, the sound of a child crying. His eyes scanned the nearby graves until he saw her, a little girl, no older than 7, kneeling just a few feet away from Claire's headstone. She was small, her dark hair pulled into a messy ponytail, her pink coat too thin for the autumn chill. Her shoulders shook as she cried, her tiny hands pressed against the grass like she was holding on to the earth itself. Daniel's breath caught. He didn't move, didn't speak. For a long moment, he just stared, his mind scrambling to make sense of what he was seeing. Who was she? Why was she here? Then instinct took over. He stood slowly, careful not to startle her, and took a step forward. The girl didn't notice him until his shadow fell across her. She gasped, her tear-streaked face snapping up to meet his. Her eyes, wide and red-rimmed, locked onto his with something like fear. Daniel crouched down, keeping his distance. He wasn't great with kids, but he knew enough to move slowly, to keep his voice soft. "Hey," he said. "You okay?" The girl blinked, her lower lip trembling. She didn't answer. Daniel glanced at the grave she was kneeling at. It was an older one, the name weathered, nearly unreadable. Not Claire's. So why was she crying here, so close to where his wife rested? He tried again. "What's your name?" A beat of silence. Then, in a voice so small it nearly broke him, she whispered, "Lily." Lily. The name struck something in him, a distant memory tugging at the edges of his mind. But before he could place it, Lily spoke again. "You're not my daddy." Daniel froze. "You're a daddy?" She nodded, her tiny finger pointing toward Claire's grave. "Mommy said my daddy was a hero. She said he's here." The words hit him like a punch to the gut. His wife's grave. A little girl who thought her father was buried there. None of it made sense. Daniel's pulse roared in his ears. He forced himself to breathe, to think. "Lily," he said carefully, "who's your mommy?" The girl wiped her nose with her sleeve. "Mommy's Sarah." Sarah. The name clicked. Claire's old friend, Sarah Bennett. They lost touch years ago, after Sarah's husband was deployed. Daniel had never met the man, but he knew he'd been a Marine, just like him. Knew he hadn't come home. A cold realization settled over him. If Lily was Sarah's daughter, and her father was a fallen soldier. "Lily," Daniel said gently, "your daddy's not buried here." Her face crumpled. "But Mommy said—" "I know," he cut in softly, "but this is my wife's grave. Your daddy, he's somewhere else. Somewhere special." Lily's chin trembled. Then why did Mommy say he was here? Daniel didn't have an answer. But one thing was clear. This little girl was lost in more ways than one. He held out his hand. Let's get you back to your mom, okay? Lily hesitated, then slipped her small fingers into his. As they walked toward the cemetery gates, Daniel's mind raced. Why would Sarah tell her daughter her father was buried here? And why at Claire's grave? There was only one way to find out. The hidden truth. Daniel kept Lily's small hand tucked securely in his as they walked through the cemetery. The little girl sniffled occasionally, her free arm wrapped tightly around herself against the autumn chill. He wanted to ask more questions. Why had she come here alone? Where was her mother? But the fragile look on her face kept him silent. The gravel path crunched beneath their feet as they neared the parking lot. That's when he saw her, a woman pacing frantically near a silver sedan, her head whipping back and forth as she scanned the cemetery. "Mommy," Lily suddenly called, her voice breaking. The woman spun around, her face pale with panic. "Lily!" She sprinted toward them, her long coat flapping behind her. In seconds, she was on her knees, clutching Lily to her chest. "Oh my God, baby! Don't ever run off like that again. You scare me to death." Lily buried her face in her mother's shoulder, fresh tears spilling over. "I'm sorry, Mommy. I just want to see Daddy." Sarah's breath hitched. Her arms tightened around her daughter, but then her gaze lifted and locked onto Daniel. Recognition flickered in her eyes. Then, something darker, fear, guilt. "Daniel," she whispered. His stomach twisted. She knew his name. That meant Claire had spoken about him. But the way Sarah looked at him, like she'd been dreading this moment for years, sent a cold ripple down his spine. "You're Claire's husband," she said, as if confirming it to herself. Daniel nodded stiffly. "Yeah." A heavy silence settled between them. Lily squirmed in Sarah's arms, oblivious to tension. "Mommy, I thought Daddy was here, but the man said no." Sarah's face drained of color. She stood abruptly, adjusting Lily on her hip. "We should go." Daniel stepped forward. "Wait." Sarah hesitated, her back rigid. "Your daughter was at Claire's grave," he said carefully. "She thought her father was buried there." Sarah didn't turn around. "It was a mistake." "Was it?" The words hung in the air, sharp and unignorable. Sarah finally turned, her eyes glassy. "Daniel, please." "Not here." Lily, sensing the tension, tucked her face into her mother's neck. Daniel exhaled. She was right. This wasn't the place. But he wasn't letting this go. "Then somewhere else," he said. "We need to talk." Sarah swallowed hard, then gave a tiny nod. 20 minutes later, they sat in a quiet corner of a nearby diner. Lily, now calmer, colored quietly in a booster seat, her legs swinging beneath the table. The waitress had brought her a chocolate milk, which she sipped between scribbling in her book. Daniel watched Sarah across the booth. She was younger than Claire had been, but grief had carved lines into her face that didn't belong there. She kept twisting her wedding ring around her finger, a nervous habit. "Why did Lily think her father was buried with Claire?" he asked bluntly. Sarah's fingers stilled. She glanced at Lily, then lowered her voice. "Because I told her he was." Daniel's jaw tightened. "Why?" Sarah hesitated, then reached into her purse. She pulled out a folded envelope, yellow with age, and slid it across the table. "Claire gave me this a month before she died," she whispered. "She made me promise not to tell you unless." Her voice broke. "Unless I had no other choice." Daniel stared at the envelope. His name was written on it in Claire's handwriting. His throat went dry. Lily suddenly piped up. "Mommy, can I have more crayons?" Sarah forced a smile. "Of course, sweetheart." She dug into her bag, handing Lily a fresh pack, then turned back to Daniel. "Not here," she murmured. "Later." Daniel pocketed the letter, his mind racing. What had Claire been hiding? And why had it led a little girl to his wife's grave? The waitress returned with their coffee. As she set the mug in front of Daniel, Lily suddenly pointed at his arm. "You have a tattoo like Daddy." Daniel froze. Sarah's eyes widened in alarm. Lily beamed, tapping his forearm. The Semper Fi inked into his skin. "Daddy had that too. Mommy showed me pictures." Daniel's pulse pounded. Slowly, he looked at Sarah. Your husband was a Marine. Sarah closed her eyes, as if bracing herself. Yes. Which unit? When she didn't answer, he pressed. Sarah, which unit? She opened her eyes. Tears spilled over. Yours. The letter. The diners hum a conversation, and clinking dishes faded into white noise. Daniel's grip tightened around his coffee mug, his knuckles turning pale. Yours. The word echoed in his skull. Sarah's husband had been in his unit. That meant he knew him. That meant he might have... No, he couldn't finish the thought. Lily, oblivious of the tension, swung her legs under the table and hummed as she colored. Sarah's hands trembled around her own cup. Her gaze locked on the table, like it held all the answers. Daniel forced his voice steady. What was his name? Sarah exhaled shakily. James Bennett. But you knew him as... Benny. The nickname tore from Daniel's throat before she could finish. Memories crashed over him. Benny's loud laugh during late-night card games. The way he always volunteered for the toughest missions. The way he'd shoved Daniel out of the way of sniper fire in Fallujah. And then the last memory. The one that still haunted him. Benny, bleeding out in the sand, his hand clutching Daniel's sleeve as he gasped. Tell Sarah I love her. Tell her. He never finished the sentence. Daniel's chest caved in. He never mentioned a wife. Or a kid. Sarah's smile was brittle. I was pregnant when he deployed. We didn't tell anyone, not even Claire, until after. She traced the rim of her mug. He wanted to wait until he came home, to surprise everyone. A cold realization slithered through Daniel. Claire knew. Sarah nodded. Daniel's mind reeled. Claire had known Benny left behind a pregnant wife. And she never told him? Why? As if reading his thoughts, Sarah nudged the envelope closer. Just read it. With numb fingers, Daniel unfolded the letter. Claire's handwriting. So familiar hurt, stared back at him. Daniel, if you're reading this, I'm gone. And there's something you need to know. Sarah's husband was Benny. I found out after his funeral, when she reached out to me. She was devastated, alone and pregnant. I helped her because that's what Benny would have wanted. What you would have wanted. But I never told you because I saw what his death did to you. You blamed yourself. If you knew about Sarah and Lily, you would have drowned in that guilt. I'm sorry for the lie. But please, don't shut them out now. They need you, and whether you believe it or not, you need them too. Love, always. Claire. The paper trembled in his hands. All these years, he'd carried the weight of Benny's death, the what-ifs and if-onlys that kept him awake at night. And Claire had known. She'd known and she was protecting you, Sarah said softly. Daniel's vision blurred. He swiped at his eyes with the back of his hand, but the tears kept coming. Lily's small voice piped up. Mister, why are you crying? Daniel looked at her, really looked at her. The way her nose scrunched when she frowned. The stubborn set of her jaw. Benny's kid. His throat worked. I knew your daddy. He managed. He was the bravest man I ever met. Lily's eyes lit up. Really? Daniel nodded, his voice rough. Really? Sarah reached across the table, her fingers brushing his wrist. Claire was right, you know. We do need you. Lily deserves to know who her father was. And you, she hesitated. You don't have to carry this alone anymore. Daniel stared at their hands, his scarred and calloused from years of war. Hers, still wearing Benny's ring. For the first time in 3 years, the weight in his chest didn't feel quite so heavy. Outside, the sun broke through the clouds, casting warm light across their table. Lily grinned and held up her drawing, a lopsided heart with 3 stick figures inside. Look, she said proudly. It's you, me, and Mommy. Daniel's breath caught. And just like that, something inside him, something he thought had died with Claire, began to heal. The first step. The diner's fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as Daniel stared at Lily's drawing. The crayon lines were bold and uneven, the kind only a child could make. Carefree and full of unguarded hope. 3 stick figures holding hands inside a lopsided heart. You, me, and Mommy. His throat tightened. It should have felt too soon, too fast. But looking at Sarah's cautious smile and Lily's expectant gaze, something shifted inside him. I think, Daniel said slowly, tracing the edge of the paper, your daddy would have loved this. Lily beamed, kicking her feet against the booster seat. Can we keep it? Sarah started to say something polite, the kind of deflection people use when they don't want to impose. But Daniel was already folding the drawing carefully into his wallet. I'm putting it right next to my favorite photo of Claire, he said. The words came easier than he expected. Sarah's breath hitched. When their eyes met, something unspoken passed between them, an understanding that this wasn't replacing anyone, just adding. The waitress came by with the check, breaking the moment. Daniel grabbed it before Sarah could. Let me? She opened her mouth to protest, then sighed. Semper Fi stubbornness? Damn right, he said, and was rewarded with a startled laugh. The first real one he'd heard from her. It changed her whole face. Outside, the autumn air had turned crisp. Lily skipped ahead toward the parking lot, suddenly full of energy now that her tears were forgotten. Daniel watched as she stopped to examine every fallen leaf like it held ancient secrets. She's got Benny's curiosity, he murmured. Sarah wrapped her arms around herself. And his lack of fear. Scares me to death sometimes. They walked in silence for a few paces before Daniel asked a question that had been burning in his chest since the cemetery. Why today? After all this time? Sarah bit her lip. Lily started asking harder questions. Where's Daddy really buried? Why can't I visit him? I panicked. Claire's grave was the only place I could think of where. She hesitated. Where someone who loved him might be. The raw honesty of it punched through Daniel's ribs. He thought of all the months he'd spent at Claire's grave, talking to cold stone instead of living people. I'm glad she found me, he said roughly. Lily came running back then, clutching a bright red leaf. Look, it's perfect. She thrust it toward Daniel. For your wife. So she has something pretty today, too. Daniel took the leaf with hands that didn't quite feel like his own. The edges were perfectly formed, the color vibrant against his palm. When he looked up, Sarah's eyes were shimmering. Can we take you home? The question slipped out before he could second-guess it. Sarah blinked. We took the bus. I've got my truck. He nodded toward the parking lot. Least I can do. Lily hooped and grabbed his hand. Yes. Mommy says only cool people drive trucks. Sarah groaned, but her smile was real. Traitor. The drive to their apartment was quieter than Daniel expected. Lily chattered from her booster seat in the back, pointing out every dog and fire hydrant they passed, but up front, the space between him and Sarah hummed with unspoken words. He learned they lived in a modest complex near the community college where Sarah taught early childhood education. That money was tight, since Benny's benefits didn't stretch as far as people thought. That Claire had been helping with Lily's daycare costs before. Sarah's voice faltered when they pulled into her complex. You don't have to. I'll walk you up. It wasn't negotiable. The neighborhood wasn't bad, but it wasn't great either, and old habits died hard. Marines didn't leave people unprotected. Lily raced ahead up the stairs, while Sarah fumbled with her keys. At the door, she turned suddenly. Would you like to come in? For coffee? I mean, you just drove us and... Yes. The word came out too fast. Daniel cleared his throat. If that's okay. Lily barreled out of the apartment before Sarah could answer, dragging a photo album behind her. You gotta see Daddy's pictures. Sarah's apartment was small but warm, the kind of place where every knick-knack had a story. The photo album fell open to a page showing Benny in dress blues, grinning with his arm around a visibly pregnant Sarah. Daniel's finger hovered over the image. He never stopped talking about you, you know, even when we were neck-deep in sand with bullets flying. Just wait till you meet Sarah, brother. She's going to change the world. Sarah made a small, broken sound. For 3 years, Daniel realized she'd probably been starving for stories like this. Proof that her husband had carried her with him to the end. Lily climbed into his lap without warning, her small fingers tracing the tattoos on his forearm. Did Daddy have these too? Same exact ones, Daniel said hoarsely. We got them together after our first tour. Sarah brought over coffee in mismatched mugs, one with a chipped handle, the other decorated with cartoon dinosaurs. Lily's doing, no doubt. As the afternoon light faded through the thin curtains, Daniel found himself telling stories he hadn't spoken in years, about Benny's terrible poker face, how he could make anyone laugh, even in the worst circumstances, the time he'd traded his last cigarette for a stray puppy they'd smuggled back to base. Somewhere between the second cup of coffee and Lily's yawns, Daniel realized he was smiling, really smiling. And when Sarah walked him to the door later, her quiet, "Thank you," carried more weight than any medal ever had. The red leaf still rested in his pocket. Tomorrow, he'd take it to Claire. He thought she'd approve. The unfinished conversation. The following Sunday found Daniel standing at Claire's grave again, but this time he wasn't alone. Lily crouched beside the headstone, carefully arranging the red leaf she'd given him alongside a handful of wildflowers she'd picked on their walk through the cemetery. "There," she declared, sitting back on her heels. "Now it's pretty." Daniel swallowed past a lump in his throat. "Yeah, kid, real pretty." Sarah stood a few steps back, giving them space. She wore a soft gray sweater that made her look younger, less weighed down. When their eyes met, she offered a small, hesitant smile. The past week had been unexpected. What started as a single afternoon of shared stories had turned into daily texts. A funny thing Lily said, a memory of Benny that surfaced. Even just a "how's your day?" That felt startlingly normal. Now, watching Lily chatter to Claire's headstone like they were old friends, Daniel realized how much he'd missed this. The quiet comfort of not being alone with his grief. Claire would have loved her, he said suddenly. Sarah moved to stand beside him. I think she did, from afar. She hesitated. "There's something else you should know. Claire, she visited us. Brought Christmas presents for Lily every year." Daniel stiffened. "She never told me. Would you have let her go if she had?" The question hung between them, heavy and undeniable, because she was right. If he'd known, he would have stopped Claire, would have buried himself deeper in the lie that Benny's death and its aftermath weren't his responsibility. Lily bounded over, breaking the tension. "Can we get pancakes after this? The kind with chocolate chips." Daniel exhaled, the tightness in his chest easing. Your dad hated sweet breakfast, called pancakes, dessert masquerading as food. Sarah snorted. He'd slather his toast in enough jam to qualify as a pastry. Lily gasped, delighted by this new detail about her father. As they walked back to the car, her small hand slipped into Daniel's with a trust that still surprised him. The diner was packed with post-church crowds, but they snagged a booth by the window. Lily immediately commandeered the crayons, launching into an elaborate drawing that involved what appeared to be a dinosaur wearing a marine hat. Sarah stirred her coffee absently. "There's something I've been meaning to ask you." Daniel braced himself. Lily's school is having a Veterans Day assembly next month. They asked if any family members would speak about. Her voice wavered. "About service. I thought, maybe you." The request settled over him. Public speaking had never been his thing, especially not about things that mattered. But the hopeful look in Lily's eyes when she glanced up from her drawing sealed it. "I'll do it." Sarah's shoulders relaxed. "Thank you. It would mean—" "Mommy, look." Lily shoved her drawing across the table. A stick figure Daniel in uniform, standing beside a taller stick figure with Benny's trademark grin. Above them, wobbly letters spelled heroes. Daniel's vision blurred. He cleared his throat. "That's going on my fridge, Marine." Lily beamed like he'd given her a medal. As the waitress brought their pancakes, chocolate chip for Lily, blueberry for Sarah, plain for Daniel because old habits died hard, he realized something startling. For the first time in years, the future didn't feel like something to simply endure. This story is about finding light in unexpected places. If it moved you, let us know in the comments. When has someone unexpectedly helped you through a difficult time? Don't forget to like and subscribe for more heartfelt stories about second chances and the connections that change us.